Okay, so I disappeared, but hear me out. The title of my podcast is what? Cosmic Chai. And the most delicious chai hibiscus is the one where you slowly simmer that and you let all the masalas marinate into that delicious ass milk. And guess what? Now I've had time to marinate. I've come back with plentiful insights about love, marriages, and what's the purpose of it all. So, shall we get back to where we were, hibiscuses? Look, before we jump into this conversation, as always, for every episode I do of Cosmic Chai, I donate to organizations that protect and support the people of Palestine. I'm going to be really transparent with you. I'm in a place now due to the fact that we are fully aware they are blocking aid getting into Palestine. Unfortunately, Israel is actively attacking the support and donations and the protections we are sending. I'm not really sure what the best way is to help, so I have gone full gung-ho with the idea of boycotting and pretty much eliminated as many traces as I'm aware of that would ever send money back into anything that harms the people of Palestine. And honestly, if we can't get our money where we would like it, that also means we can stop our money from flowing where we would like. So, yeah, if you're watching my podcast, I would really love for you, however you can, to help protect and look after the people of Palestine. And also like and subscribe. What are you doing, honey? I know you love our conversations. Other than that, let's get into this delicious ass cup of cosmic joy. Talk to you about the process of creating this episode because I feel like it's its own little weird mystical experience. So this episode was actually meant to be released on Valentine's Day, right? And I planned the whole episode out and it was really spicy and sassy and sprinkle kind of vibes. And whilst I was creating the episode, all of a sudden in my head, the phrase love is an investment, it just wouldn't leave my mind. And I kept walking around and I was like, maybe this tied to readings, or maybe it'll be something that comes up from my like TikTok horoscope videos. But this phrase wouldn't leave me. And throughout that week, one thing would happen, another thing would happen. So I just didn't have time to like record the podcast. And then the following week, I had the most life-changing week regarding like romance, relationships, what I want from marriage. Like it truly has like changed my trajectory. And then when I was rethinking about, okay, when I get back to England from Punjab and I have time and capacity to film this episode, everything I wanted to say had internally shifted. And also, I want to share with you all, in case any of you are new around here, I am a Vedic astrologer, okay? My whole spiel is welcome to colonizer-free astrology. And I try to basically educate people and bring awareness to spiritual practices that are unfortunately culturally appropriated, communities don't have influence, and just all that kind of thing, right? One thing I was thinking about, and I think also like timings are so funny astrologically, but since Saturn has been making its way through all 9 types of Aquarius, I cannot emphasize this. I have been slowly so radicalized regarding the things that I value, the things that I want from relationships and marriage, and also just like the way I view the outer world. It's so deeply changed, I say slowly, but like I just feel like it's eclipsed all my old beliefs. Like I can't ever imagine believing whatever I did in the past. And what's so interesting is I know people in the West are so scared of Saturn, and again that's due to like cultural appropriation, whitewashing, misinformation, right? They take our practices and skew them to scare you and so they can make money off you, like please buy my services and all that crap, right? But Saturn is actually known as the crown giver, the most merciful. Saturn also represents fruits and also bitter fruits, right? And when I think about what the different types of Aquarius represent, so firstly, Saturn was in Aquarius type 1 to 2. You'll know that as Dhanishta, right? Dhanishta represents this idea of, it's symbolized by a flute, right? It's Shivji playing the flute. So this idea that you can't fill the soul with hollow things. And it's also associated to oddballs and outcasts who become famous in their fields, right? And it also talks about learning to go with like God's timing, right? And learning to follow our inner rhythm instead of trying to work against it. And then Saturn now is in Shatabishka. So that again, that's Aquarius type 3 to 5. Shatabishka is so interesting to me, and everything we have seen unfold and will see unfold under Shatabishka is just, it's insane, but also thrilling and very, very hopeful. But Shatabishka is ruled by Varuna. He's known as the cosmic god of justice, so the deliverer of karma, okay? Shatabishka also denotes this whole kind of journey of opening our darkest, deepest, dirtiest wounds, but also simultaneously having the ability to close these wounds forever and fully heal them. Shatabishka in English translates into like 100 demons, 100 healers, and there are other interpretations of it being like 100 surgeons, right? And it's Shakti, so imagine a Shakti is like a superpower to help that particular star sign achieve its life purpose or whatever the intended goal is with its placement. Shakti is to fully heal the physical and spiritual body. Like, come on, my guy. And we have not got there. We've got some time yet. Then Saturn will finish up in Aquarius in Bhuva Bhadra. That is Aquarius type, I want to say either 7 to 9 or 6 to 9. I forgot where we were. But Bhuva Bhadra is like the most scandalous. A lot of interesting things unfold under that nakshatra. But what's very particular about that nakshatra is it's symbolized with a man with two faces. And there's a unique journey for those individuals about something through their life, their career. Again, it depends on which birth charts it's sitting in and where it is in the horoscope. It represents calling out hypocrisies, right? And again, that sign Shakti is known as the power to spiritually uplift the sacrificer. So when we go through this episode, I want you to keep that in mind, because the things I want to talk about essentially is my own journey from sprinkle to very recently a whole different mindset, right? And it feels quite sudden, but as I reflect on, I'm like, no, this has been slowly happening over the last couple of years, but now I think it's just integrated where I'm like, oh, these are my beliefs, this is what I think, cool, you know? And even then, to make it even, if you want to concentrate more on the astrology before we get down to our juicy conversation, Jupiter, which represents like partnerships, fortune, all that kind of jazz, and you know, our moral compass is currently in a sign called Bharani. Bharani is Aries type 5 to 8, and what's so interesting is Bharani represents Shakti. So again, I always like to emphasize this to people. The star signs, we call them nakshatras. The nakshatras to us are not gendered. So people would see Shakti and be like, oh, the divine mother, it's all about women. No. Shakti to us just means creation, creativity. And so whenever we're referring to Shakti, we're talking about a person's strength to truly and authentically express their identity without very little fear of ramifications, and a certain type of courage, bravery, joy, pleasure, all that kind of thing. And I think, again, when I think about just the astrological placements, because Saturn and Jupiter spend a long time in the star signs they occupy, I think it's been this trajectory of, if we reflect back to Dhanishta, right, this idea of me being like, what's really interesting, Dhanishta represents following God's timing. My mom is inadvertently the biggest tantric I've ever met. Like, Mandy the MILF is unnecessarily spooky and accurate without even trying. And one thing she always said growing up was, we used to fight about it, but now I'm like the most thankful and grateful. She didn't want me to get married until I was into my 30s. And her whole kind of point of view is, you as a woman have to experience some life. You were going to grow and change and develop, but the key thing is, she felt until I had certain experiences and until I reached a certain age, I would not know truly what I like. And I was very prone to being like influenced or like people pleasing and all of that. But that was her view for many people. She's like, no one has business getting married until they're into their 30s, because you have not fully formed, and you also haven't been broken enough to know how to rebuild and understand pain in different people. So when I look at everything, when we started this Saturn in Aquarius, I was literally like very etchy. I'm like, I should probably get married now. I'm a particular age, blah, blah, blah. And the deeper we've got into this Saturn Aquarius, I'm like, no, but my timing is my timing, and I'm really okay. Because on top of that, during this transit, I have done so many divorce readings, and I've done a lot of sessions with people who are in very rocky and, I don't know, hardships with their partner. And I've read for over nearly 3,000 people. Isn't that insane? But I always had this belief, because again, astrology is a super mystical, spiritual thing. And I think one thing I always think of, there's certain garments for us as an astrologer, like it's destiny for the people that sit down in front of us. So I felt like when I was having these readings, it was kind of like a divine education about pay attention to what these people are going through. So when it's your time, and also knowledge. I like to share knowledge without exposing anyone's stuff, because obviously people come to me in delicate situations and they need to vent and get it out. But I'm like, oh, I think I'm meant to share this knowledge. So I started this transit conscious about timing of marriage, and now I'm like, no, everything is perfect and flowing. And the more I kind of blossom and grow into whoever I'm meant to be, the love I have to give and the love I experience is so much richer and more stable and healthy than I think it ever has been before. And then we have Saturn in Shatabishka, right? So opening and closing those wounds. Since we enter this particular part of the transit, I feel like I've had a lot of self-realizations about messy and sticky things about myself, which I want to discuss in the podcast, because I think it's so easy to create this narrative of I am perfect, F them, if you don't want that, all that kind of egotistical nonsense. Whereas I'm like, oh, actually for me, I've learned where I've dropped the ball, or where I am not a good partner, or where I need to show up a little bit stronger and more mature. And that's definitely helped my situations. Also, I learned about my insecurities during this transit. And then TBC about Saturn in Purvabhadra, I don't know, y'all. I don't know what that looks like, but we'll find out. Other than that, the routine, let's grab a cup of chai. And for part one, I wanted to open up by dissecting sprinkle. I just want you to know, I love me some sprinkle content. It's so entertaining and delicious and scandalous and sassy and spicy and empowering, right? But do I think sprinkle mindset is the best mindset in the long run for a truly authentic and vulnerable relationship? Not so much, right? So if you've never heard of sprinkle content, I'll summarize it, right? Sprinkle content is usually created by straight women, and it basically is coaching women on how to make sure they are not settling for people who will disrespect them, disregard them, and basically put them in compromising positions. Now, underpinning all of that, and this is why I don't have an issue with sprinkle content, if you really pay attention to the content creators when they're being vulnerable and sharing how do they arrive at these insights, or why do they feel like this is the best guidance to share with women, a lot of them have very hurtful and heartbreaking experiences where they have attempted to be vulnerable or, been more themselves, and they have been disrespected and disregarded. That has left some sort of impact on them, and this is the way they feel is the safest and healthiest way to engage with relationships, right? And I think that's really important to outline, because I have this huge belief since Aquarius has been in Saturn's been in Aquarius, that I think it is super tough to have a real relationship that is truly lovely, really healthy, when we live in a society that upholds colonialism and capitalistic beliefs. Even think about sprinkle, right? There's an element of finances that is brought up during that content, right? I personally feel the second you put a transactional energy on relationships, you can never enjoy the relationships, because it's a constant performance and the soul will get tired, right? And again, that's what I'm saying. I have no issue with content like sprinkle, because the whole thing is, it exists because women, well, not just women, people are not safe in a capitalistic and colonial enabled society. So therefore, when you think about love and you think about partnerships, there's all these traits that are brought up that have nothing really to do with God, your soul development, or anything, and it's just about survival. And I think if you look around a lot of the content that's created about relationships, a lot of the rhetoric, a lot of the issues we're seeing, it's a reflection of existing in a society that enables the discrimination, the hate, and the violence it currently does, is doing in such a way to make sure. I personally also have this belief, right? The reason we have ended up where we do, where there's so many relationship issues, marriages are not working out and all of that, there's different layers to this also, right? But I do think sometimes society is structured in a way that I don't think it values partnerships or people who would like to build their version of whatever a home is. It's like, that's capitalism. It only cares about the labor you put in. So to exist in that society or that kind of mindset and strive for love and strive for happiness is not easy. And then on top of that, you want to put down you're a marginalized person, baby. So that's why, again, I think Sprinkle Sprinkle is literally, all jokes aside, Sprinkle Sprinkle is a self-defense mechanism, I personally feel, against patriarchy, against capitalism, and obviously colonial ideologies. You cannot ignore the fact that most Sprinkle Sprinkle content creators are women of color. And I think that's something unique. You know, when we talk about love and relationships, I always feel like there's a certain lens on it, right? And I don't think it captures the nuances of, for instance, being a South Asian, or when we talk about Black love, or when we talk about queer love and stuff. The advice they give it, I'm like, this is very narrow-minded and I think only can really ever benefit one type of demographic. And I think there's so much it leaves out of the experiences people have. Even like, you know, like if you're a plus size person, if you're a person with disabilities, all of that. So I think the reason Sprinkle Sprinkle content captivates a wider audience compared to maybe the relationship coaches you see with the Spotify podcast and all of that, is because these are people who have been let down by the current norms of romances and love and all the discrimination we see in it. So I think universally a lot of marginalized people are going to see themselves in that content. And that's so sad, right? We've ended up in a place when we talk about love, we talk about longevity in relationships, and connection, so much of it is about survival. And that's not cool, hibiscuses. So I think, again, right, the shift of this episode is to say, yeah, I get why you're attracted to Sprinkle Sprinkle. I understand why that mentality is so popular, and to a certain extent perhaps is necessary because we don't live in a safe society. But I think if you are someone, if you happen to vibe with astrology or spirituality and you're striving for something different, I wanted to give you a different take on love and romances, right? Because as I said at the beginning of this episode, in my mind, whilst I was creating this, all I could think is love is an investment, love is an investment. I was like, where is this coming from? Not knowing the week ahead would be the most life-changing thing for me. And, you know, when I reflect on Sprinkle Sprinkle, there's almost like this idea of a game being played of like, if you keep this persona and I keep my persona, we know what the arrangement is, we're good. Because it's transactional. Essentially, you're enabling transactional behavior, right? And then the week I had, I felt like, listen, I think if you ever want to be in a partnership that is honest and you can really be yourself, if that's not for everybody, but I personally feel like that's the healthiest stuff, where you can truly show up as yourself and you have the space to develop and not worry about each other walking out on one another. You have to kind of see love as an investment. Even then, as I say that, I'm worried that's like a reflection of like capitalist or colonial beliefs, because I'm like, why am I looking at love as a business? But that's the easiest way that like I know how to describe it. In fact, even if you didn't want to say love as an investment, I liken it to farming. I'm a Punjabi girl. I come for farmers, okay? But to me, it's like the same day you plant the seed is not the same day you eat the fruits. There's a process. You go through different seasons. You face many a storm. But you still show up, you still nurture the crop, you still protect the crop from insects and stuff. And eventually, after tender love and care, you get some amazing returns. Again, it's so hard not to talk about love in a capitalistic way, and I'm really picking up on that, right? But I just want to say, I understand sprinkle, sprinkle. I completely get why people gravitate towards that. But, I wanted to give you a different take. And with that, let's get into part 2, which is the Waheguru around love. So where do we go from here? If we're going to step away from sprinkle, sprinkle, give people another option, what does that look like? I wanted to give you a breakdown of actually a religious and spiritual point of view. Okay, so again, if any of you are new to me, I'm Punjabi. I grew up in both Sikh and Hindu practices. I basically grew up inside of Dharmic faiths. And I think people are so used to me talking about Hinduism, Sanatana Dharma and stuff like that, that I don't get to showcase actually a lot of my views on, existing in the world, how you engage with people, love, money, development, actually are deeply rooted in Sikhi's outlook, okay? And I gathered some reflections from the Guru Granth Sahib and different Sikh scholars about what love is. And I think you'll find them really interesting. So the first one I found was in the Gurbani, it says love is a unifying force and its manifestations are many. I think that's so important because one reflection I had when I was looking at different sprinkle content creators and all these different kind of like dating coaches, love experts, and oh my God, even like what I feel are like very untoward religious leaders projecting onto people and scaring them about their relationships. What I found was they were so restrictive and actually going against the nature of what love is, right? Because they all share the same rhetoric in one way or another. You must appear in a world in a certain way. Your partner must be this. You must date like this. And if the love and the dating and the relationship is not like that, you must leave. It's all a red flag. And there's so much fear mongering. And I was like, at what point did you forget love is like a transcendent experience? The way love finds you is not the same way love will leave you. It's an ever-growing, changing thing. So then I think when you put on like all these restrictions and like these binary ideas and like these limitations on it, of course, so many people are having sour experiences around love. Of course, we're seeing an influx of people being, without being dramatic, I feel like a lot of the way people love and date now is like deeply like psychologically damaging. I don't think it's healthy for people. There's just like, oh my God, there's so much stress, pressure and anxiety that exists in relationships, marriages and love that simply shouldn't, right? And I wanted to go back to this idea that love is a unifying force. Love is not meant to make you feel isolated. You should not feel separate from your soul. And what I mean by that is, again, when I think about all the rhetoric around like love and relationships now, it's almost like coaching people to mask their identity or what they're really about. That is not healthy. And I think as we go through the experience of love, it's really meant to like bring us back in touch with our essence, and it should make us feel more comfortable to be ourselves, right? And ourselves can change. The idea of unifying is different parts of you come together, and that integrated piece it creates is like the best version of yourself. But that's a process. So you're going to have ups and downs with someone, right? You're going to have differences in personalities, but like there's so much to it. And I think it's beautiful that in the Gurbani they say its manifestations are many. Because I think to be honest, a lot of the rhetoric we hear online is very tied to certain experiences and identity, and I don't think they account for the nuances that we see in like the South Asian experience around romances and relationships, the idea of black love, queer love and all of that once again, right? But I think it's also important to remember you are always growing and developing through different types of love, whether it's your friendships, whether it's you meet people and you have shared passion, causes, ventures, your family unit. But please do not think if you are not constantly having romantic love that you're not getting there. My favorite thing with astrology is the irony is I just posted on my TikTok a breakdown of JLo's Vedic charts, and I did it in depth on my Patreon page, right? But I was gagged when I was going through her Mahadashas, which are like your transits. That's how we predict what most likely experiences you will go through at that time. Her marriage was not meant to happen until her late 40s, early 50s. And what's so funny is, I don't know if you know the story about her and Ben, but her and Ben Affleck were originally meant to get married in the early 2000s. Basically, everything broke down either of the wedding day or just before. And then they broke up. The marriage never happened, right? But the thing is, as she went through life and they married other people, they had kids with other people, all of that, there was always this connection between one another, and people in the world always be like, Bennifer, and like whenever they talked to them, they would always bring up each other's exes, right? And it's so funny, they finally got married when Venus and Jupiter were in Antardasha for her. So Venus represents the wife, Jupiter represents the husband. And that's why I always say to people, don't think because you haven't reached like what you feel is like the happiest and healthy love, it's never going to happen. God's timing always. And then someone who's like, it never, like, I'm always amazed, even now. People are like, oh, do you ever get bored of doing readings? No, like the love I have for like astrology and just studying religion is like, it's like Sufi level. Like I could do this shit all day and never get bored. But I am never not amazed when like I meet people and I read the charts, and then when we get to love and relationships, or there's a report bill and I'm like, okay, it says A, B, and C, now you say your piece. And then they tell me their stories about when they got married and stuff. And then you look at the charts, I'm like, everything is so divinely orchestrated. And even in your deepest, darkest, loneliest, most heartbreaking moments, God is shifting stuff around in the background. And he's always preparing you. This is another thing I think I've really learned over the last couple of years and with the current transits. Do not think you are ever not being prepared or molded and transformed for whatever the end goal is. You always are. And it's probably a very cheesy example, but again, when I think about like some of my favorite Bollywood couples, they all get married during like what's predicted to be their married doshas, but their journeys in between are so interesting. So even like Deepika and Ranveer, they actually got married, I don't know intentionally or not, but when the marriage was meant to happen. And you can see throughout both their charts, it's these people growing together, immaturity is fading, vulnerability is happening, and it's so interesting how it comes together, right? Another one, you might find them controversial, I don't, but like Ranbir Kapoor and Alia Bhatt, same thing. And you can just always see it. So I'm like, they had other partners, they didn't have straightforward relationships, and they built friendships, they were complicated. Human souls are complicated, so love will be like that too. But it's just this idea that don't think because it's not happening in a particular way, it won't happen for you. And I also think it's a reflection of the maturity of the soul. It shows a lot about how comfortable you are in your skin. And I always think it's so important to remember that. And also, like, cannot emphasize this enough, and I'm not really cheesy with astrology, but like, everyone is promised a partnership in this life, and it serves such an important part of your development. Now, the experiences of those partnerships will range, right? You come with different karmas, you come with different energies, there's purpose in them, but no one's meant to be lonely. So to then, I don't know, look down on relationships, be potentially negative or like quite brutish with relationships will never serve you. Or even to be transactional, again, I like said it earlier, the second you put a certain vibe on something and it restricts you from really being yourself or giving yourself in full totality, no good will come from it, to put it politely. And I can vouch for that as someone who has done, like, I was thinking about it, in the last 2 years, I have done more divorce readings or more readings for people in very difficult relationship dynamics than I ever have in the last like 16 years of reading for people. I always think that's God trying to speak to me about pay attention, girl. And I'm like, no take it. And when I think about, well, what leads them to these states of conflict and uncomfortability, 3 commonalities I found. So one is this idea that they rush timing. Like, you can see in the chart things are meant to happen when they happen, and they're like, I don't understand. But I'm like, it's because you forced it, dummy. You went against your own timing. You were so hell-bent on wanting what you had that you thought would be better than whatever God was going to give you. So of course you're going to end up in a position of pain, distress, and it's not a partnership that was meant to be forged, right? Secondly, a lot of people, sadly, don't know themselves when they go into partnerships. And there's this myth that all of a sudden you'll know yourself in a deeper way. That's not how partnership works. To a certain extent, you need to come to the table as fully formed people. And then you are an ever-changing person, so your relationship will change too. That is so different and much more healthier than people who fundamentally don't know each other. So when the relationship gets to a certain stage, all of a sudden they don't like one another. And they're like, is this the real you? I never know this. It's like, no, you took on their identity. You didn't know yourself. So now all of a sudden everyone's upset things are not working when you weren't really yourself to begin with. So where was this going to go, right? And then I think the third thing is there's this fundamental disappointment that love is not this fantasy that they thought it would be. Now, this is not the same to say as when a partner is neglectful, mean, and inconsiderate. No, but like, I've seen like this constant pattern where people, again, they place these standards onto relationships, and I don't think it's wholly organic. So then the only person they upset is themselves. I think that's something to consider, right? So when you approach Sprinkle, again, funny, scandalous, spicy, to a certain extent empowering and protectful, we get it. But in the long term, if you are approaching love with this sense of falseness, it's not really authentically you, how could you ever really enjoy stuff? Right? And pay attention to the stuff that we shouldn't idolize celebrity couples by any means, but I think about the stuff that a lot of Bollywood couples say, and they're very transparent and being like, no, marriage is different, it is tough, and you're always learning. But the thing is, there's a level of acceptance you have with one another that you couldn't find elsewhere, and that's where the love blossoms from. I think that's worth keeping in mind, hibiscuses. Which leads me to my next two quotes. So in Elements of Sikhi, they talk about prejudice stop us from seeing the essence of Waheguru. So Waheguru is the name of God. And I cannot emphasize this enough, right? I think love is also a medium of God to bring us closer back to him. Because if you think about it, right? Love requires us to be forgiving. Love requires us to be understanding. It requires us to be honest. It requires us to be flexible. And it requires us to think outside of ourselves. These are all fundamental qualities you need if you ever want to reach moksha, liberation, right, from the cycle of reincarnation. And I always have this belief, God speaks to us in a language that we understand. Love is a perfect vehicle for us to actually feel connected to God. And I say a lot in my readings, I feel like when I sit down with people and I go through all the readings in A, B, and C, there is such a mystical experience where I'm like, I feel like I'm experiencing God, because I'm like, it's so wild. You would sit in front of me, I would say all this stuff that I see, you feel a certain type of emotion towards me, and it's just, it feels so beautiful. And I'm like, God appears in different ways to teach people and engage with them and help them get where they need to be. Love is the same. And you know, in Sikhi, there are two concepts that I hold so close to my life, and they're daily incorporated into my activities. But one is seva, this act of worship and service. You know, it's one of the biggest requirements of Sikhs, that you continuously do seva, and you do it out of love, out of pyar, out of duty, but you don't do it to brag to other people. I think when we reflect on love, I don't know, I feel like a lot of the time when I think about the rhetoric about love and how people approach romances, it's always so much about, what can you give me, or you didn't do this for me in A, B, and C. But I'm like, bro, you're missing out on like what I feel the fundamentals are in love, right? Regardless of your gender or your sexuality, ultimately love is to be of service to the other person if you truly care about them. And I think that's a hard truth. People don't want to admit they're in relationships with people they don't care about. And I also don't think, because the thing is, you know, I read for such a spectrum of people, all types of ethnicities, all types of religion. And when I think about people who come from certain religious backgrounds, and this is all religious backgrounds, but I think when they're more tied to the institution than like the spiritual side of their faith, they're almost prone to ending up in dynamics with other people where it's just like, we achieved this goal or this persona, what was told for us to reach, and now we're mad at each other because we're not fulfilling each other's needs. But then I'm like, guys, just think about it. Like, logically think about how this union was formed, what your reasons are for being in the union. At what part of this do you think this is God? At what part of this do you think is destiny? This is the thing, you manufacturing stuff is not the same as destiny, and it's not, doesn't mean it's tied to your soul. A lot of people can lie to themselves about what they want, what they think they're doing. So in Hinduism, we had, not even just Hinduism, in Dharmic faith, we had the concept of Maya, illusions. And it's when you are truly in love, and it's a selfless love, it's a devotional love, it's a love of service, that's when you can pierce through the illusions and see the reality of what things are. Which leads me to the next thing. There's a concept in Sikhi called Simran. So this idea of like meditating on God's name, right? Like oneness. For me, when I talk about like savor and simran, I think there's this idea of always be mindful of why you are here, and always, even in your toughest moments, understand like it's all God's plan. So don't try and play God with people's feelings. Don't try and like imprint on them. Really be at peace. And whatever happens in your dynamic, you should always be striving for peace amongst one another. It shouldn't always be so sensational. It shouldn't always be about what can you give me? You're not doing enough. Like all that rhetoric. How could love ever grow hibiscuses? Which leads me to my next point. There was this really beautiful line that I found in Sikh scholars' like essays on love, and he essentially says, "Love isn't about improving the essence of a being, but becoming illuminated and fulfilled." I wanted to stop there because, again, when we think about it's tough to have authentic and real love in a society that is upholding colonial beliefs and therefore capitalism, patriarchy, and all these things that are so much about this. Think about the Vedic around love. Isn't it weird? All of a sudden, people are like, how to like develop yourself to be worthy of love and all of that shit. It's so far from what love is and what I think God intends. And this is why I like to remind people, because again, you can see it in like their astrology. You know, with Vedic astrology, we have 20 charts, right? We can see a lot about the individual, the most deepest, intimate parts of themselves. Yes, most of you are promised, well, all of you are promised a partnership. The quality of that partnership is questionable based on your karmas. But the whole point is, whatever that experience is, it's not for you to sit there and prove a certain being. And it's also not there to say you'll become better just because this being enters your life. The whole point is, it's meant to put you in a situation, experience, and dynamic that makes you understand, am I truly being authentic to myself? Am I radiating traits and behaviors that are nourishing to my soul and the other person? So I genuinely think the most spiritual people have the most, I think, transformative kinds of love. And I think also people confuse having like a pleasant and pretty love for a beneficial type of love. I don't think they're mutual. I don't think love has to be cruel. I don't think love has to be harmful. But I think there's this level of respect, duty, devotion, and freedom and trust that only love can give you. And I think that has so much to do with stuff, right? Which then leads me to part 3 of the podcast. What is the astrological purpose of love, right? So if we're meant to go through this vehicle of love, which is meant to like enlighten us, change us, and really put us in a state where we're more godly than ever, bro, like how do we work that? Like what the fuck is going on? So, yep, you guessed it. The astrological purpose of when we look at love and partnerships is karmas. So there are different types of karmas. That will be next week's podcast. But essentially, how you treat people is so much of the karma you will have come your way and the karma you will be freed from. And what's so interesting is, from an astrologer's point of view, I've actually met so many men. So in our astrology, there's 20 birth charts, right? You have D1 and D9. D1 is like the clay version of you. So it's not the final product, but D9 is. And also, a lot of the time, most men actually, like most straight men, will have really weak D1 charts. So we see they're okay. They can kind of function, but it's through partnership. That's when good fortune comes their way. That's when they kind of had the discipline, the patience. Like, they do better in marriage than they do in casual relationships than they do by themselves, to be frank with you, right? And yeah, I would say in the last 5 years, your girl has been 10 to 10 for her predictions when it comes to straight men and getting them into relationships. And I have been invited to many a wedding that, you know, not sprinkle, but you get me, masala, jai. But again, if you looked at it through an astrological lens, it's ultimately for the development of the soul. So again, when you're engaging with love and the whole process of it, really think about, is my behavior, is what I'm putting out here gonna serve me in the future? Like, will I be proud of my behavior? Is there any way that this will bite me in the ass? Simple, right? And also, I think if you want to get like a wooga about it, I never share like too much the occult side of astrology, but you know, like in Hinduism, when you get married, we have the belief that you exchange destiny. So tying back to this idea that like a lot of the guys I know, whilst they were okay-ish by themselves, as soon as they got married, money happened for them, businesses happened, like they were much more happier, and like all these prosperous things came to them. I fundamentally believe and have seen is because you have inherited the destiny and energy of your partner, and it enriches you. Look at any of your favorite celebrities and people you look up to. How different were their lives after marriage? How much did they gain? How much did they prosper? Again, Aliyah Bhatt and Ranbir Kapoor are actually one of my favorite examples of this, because she got married during her Ketu Mahadasha, which people always think is like, oh my god, isolation, like I'm gonna go crazy, all these awful things are gonna happen. No. If you have a good Ketu and you've accumulated good karmas over your past lives, this is when it pays out. And boys has her paid out, you know. And I think also tied to that, fundamentally, when we say you exchange destinies and you are tying everything together, and it's this character development, and the soul is the most nourished and able to like spiritually progress the fastest through love, there's an element of you and your partner are a reflection of one another, right? So again, when I think of Sprinkle, right, again, whilst all of the women are amazing, they're interesting, they're definitely good looking, I don't know how to put it, but I always feel like there's a lack of a glow, like a true happiness. And I think people are starting to see, not just through Sprinkle, but this idea of like all these manufactured couples, all these ones who look very pretty, all these ones who look like they have a powerful love. I think we're all starting to sense like this innate sense of sadness, or it's just not all that. And really that's because when you are loved on by the right person, it just transforms you in so many beautiful ways. So don't worry about the other person. Think about the way you love. When you look into the reflection of the people you are dating, you feel a certain type of way for, what is the state of them? Are they happier? Or do they feel more ambitious, more incapable? Like, what's happening, hibiscuses? And that's what I wanted to get at. Like, when we talk about love and marriage and romance, and we will have many of those conversations on this podcast as I mature and I enter different dynamics, right? It is so easy to look at the other person, but what can you give me? What, and all of that. The whole point of love is self-reflection. What are you capable of? No, you don't have to be forgiving in terms of they're going to mess up loads. But if you are truly loving and everything is God to you and you have all this faith, then your love should reflect that. And that's one thing I wanted to touch on, right? So going back to love as an investment, will open up this podcast and the phrase that was sticking in me. One thing I was thinking about, because I have sprinkle roots, I don't hide from it, right? I was thinking about when I was younger, actually I was not the best girlfriend. I think I was incredibly mean, selfish and childish. So I'll give you some background on me, right? I grew up in a very loving home, a really fun home, right? But I was always aware of like poverty, and I grew up in a really white town, and I felt really like out of place. So from a young age, it just kind of entered my mind. And also my nanny is an entrepreneur and she built a lot and I saw her work a lot. So I think that deeply impacted me, right? But I was just aware that I did not want to live a life like the lives I was seeing around me. So from a very, very young age, I've always been like highly ambitious, very competitive, and like I need to get here. But that comes from, the reason I say I need to get here is that's me seeking safety, right? Again, as a young person, I'm not conscious of this. I'm just like, oh, like, fuck you if you don't want to be here with me, you're out, you know? So when I think about my relationships as a young person, oh, bro, they're not the bad guy, I am. And I feel so bad when I think about those dynamics, right? Because each time it was friendship. These are people who were genuinely caring, right? But every time the relationship ended is because I wanted to be in a certain place, and either they couldn't physically be in the same place. When I say place, I don't just mean like location, but it's like, this is a life I know I want to lead. I want to be here. And the gag is, I don't even lead that life anymore, and nor does that life appeal to me, right? But God develops you that certain way. And I would literally be so scared that I wouldn't be safe and get this like independence and this thing that I had like put at high value, that my whole thing is I freak out and end the relationship. But I was mean. I didn't consider their feelings. I didn't even give them the option to say like, look, maybe we try this and we grow. Like, I didn't let the love grow because I was placing so many restrictions and limits on it. You know, I had like, but I think it's so important to share the not so good things about you, because if you act like, oh my God, I'm such a nice person, why is everything not working out for me? It's never that black and white. You have to look at yourself with a certain level of accountability, you know? So therefore, like, when I think about everything, I completely lost my train of thought. My package came. Sorry, guys. I believe I was in the middle of telling you what an awful person I was when I was younger. But my point is that you have to look at the roles you play, right? And the thing is, and again, it's survival. Like, I was a woman of colour that's acutely aware that I am not going to be afforded certain financial opportunities. I'm going to have to work 10 times harder. And I think just from young, I just want that security and I want that protection. So a lot of my views on love and relationships was super financial. And I was really, really mean. Like, I look back and I'm like, there was no need to treat someone like that, because it wasn't like anything was wrong with their love or their romances. These were really lovely men, well, boys, because I was a young person. But I was so scared that I would be safe and protected that I didn't let things flourish and happen the way they want to. And if you wanted some cosmic chai, I don't really talk about my birth charts online and stuff because it's incredibly intimate and private, but I always think it's so interesting as a learning point. So we obviously I have my own astrologers, like we have a family astrologer and stuff like that, right? Because fun fact, even though I can read really wonderful for you all, I'm shit at seeing my own future, and that's the way it should be, right? But a bandit once said to my nanny that she will not get married until this age, because as she grows and develops and she achieves certain things, she's going to find it really, really hard to look at someone and feel safe and secure. So therefore, the relationships are not meant to work until this age, when she has mellowed out a bit. And it's so funny when I look back as to why my relationships were not working out when I was younger, right? Because I did that, and we talk about karmas and how people treat you, and then when I would get deeper into my 20s, I would date like super successful guys, and they would be as cool to me as I was cruel to those boys when I was younger, right? So then eventually the karma's paid out. I learn my lessons, I see the reflection of self, and then we get to me entering my 30s, right? I'm not there yet, I will be soon. But let's draw back to what I said, to love is an investment, right? I think it's only recently dawned on me over these really interesting, spicing dating encounters I've had over life, that for me, my idea of security isn't actually tied to finances. Whilst yes, it's a practical part of it, I think a love that would sustain me and make me feel safe is a love where that I'm fully accepted, a love where I can really be myself. And likewise, if I want all that, and I'm like really goofy as a person, like I gag at this idea because like I sometimes think I can be a baddie, but then my nature's really goofy. Like I'm very playful, I'm childish in nature, like I'm funny as hell. So I'm like, oh, actually that kind of whole baddie fantasy thing won't work for me practically because I'm a very expressive person. But I'm like, oh, if I want all that, then I also have to give someone the time, space, and experiences to allow me to be vulnerable and let them do it back. And I just think it probably sounds really, really stupid, right? But I think I just had this very manufactured idea of love and romance, and I would always feel so let down and angry when it wasn't achieved. But then when I sit there with myself, I'm like, this could never have flourished because the things you are craving are fundamentally not good for you, and they're not going to be applicable or be able to be sustained if you fulfill your life purpose the way it's meant to be. And life happens. And even like when I achieved a certain level of financial success, I often liken it to like, imagine you finally get your hands on that dessert you've been craving, but when you put it in your mouth, it's like ashes. So then, like, it again, I always feel like boys are afforded this opportunity to be immature and women are not, right? And we don't talk enough about young girls going into womanhood, messing up, learning about themselves, not being nice people, rectifying and growing it, because we kind of just think we're like, girls are automatically made to be like these loving, perfect mothers and all of this stuff. And I'm like, no, the same way as you, a boy, grow into your manhood, so does a woman. And you should allow yourself to mess up, but then you got to be apologetic, then you got to take accountability, and then you got to grow and develop. So yeah, when I think about less sprinkle and more Om Waheguru, I think ultimately the reason I say more Om Waheguru, because when you put that level of, I don't know, godliness, spiritualness on love, ultimately it's the most loving act to yourself. But there's an irony that, like, it requires you to be of service, it requires you to be really self-aware, and just exude the traits that I think all religions try to give to us. And I actually think if you can do that, when you remove all these expectations, timing, restrictions on love, I think then you experience something so beautiful. So going back to that, where I was showing you I had like this life-changing week. In that week, I learned the following things about myself, right? Where I want to live after marriage is completely different, right? I do not aspire to be a housewife, and I don't think, even though I could do it well, there's no point in me faking that I want to live a certain life as a wife that meets other person's expectations, because fundamentally it will crush my soul, because I'm creative, I am adventurous, like there's all these things in me that I'm like, they're not meant to be tied to fulfilling this fantasy that other people have. Like, I will literally make myself so sick and depressed. I also want a love that's a friendship. Like, there's all these like realizations I had, but when I was having them, I was like, oh my god, here you've been priding yourself on being this person that can play this role perfectly, and the issue is you're playing a role, you're not being yourself. And I think just in that week I accepted the things that I want perhaps are unorthodox, right? And perhaps are not how everybody else would do and approach marriage, but they work for me and they keep me safe. And the thing is, if I've been able to let go of all the other limitations and restrictions I put on myself, aka, again, if you're new around here, I used to have a huge ass corporate job, and then I just got back in touch with spirituality and the things I used to love as a kid, which is Vedic Astrology, and look where it's got me, and it's given me so much, and it's brought me a type of happiness. Why would that not work in love? And sometimes it is just better to let go and let God, and just trust the process, and not be so like phony or money minded. And we haven't touched on it a lot, and we could do different episodes on this, but I think there's a certain process I'm going through as a South Asian person of unlearning colonial beliefs that were put on us when it comes to love and relationships, which is like, it's not difficult, because I'm like, yeah, this makes sense, bro, let's do it. But I think, again, like, culture and spirituality is difficult because I'm also aware that whatever love I choose to have and whoever is my life partner, like, that love's going to be witnessed. And I think that's where I get kind of scared and like, what will other people think? I know I shouldn't, but it still exists in me. I'm like, but then I'm like, why should I care? If I have faith in God and God is doing everything for me, why the fuck do I care what people think? Because it's ultimately God's blessing. Other than that, I know you missed me. I hope that was helpful. I love a little chit chats. I will be doing this on a weekly basis, so make sure you subscribed. Welcome to my YouTube channel. I know I saved it till last, but I'll be posting different type of Vedic astrology content. If you want to learn a little bit more, you can explore with me. We can have a goofy time. And Cosmic Jar will be posted on here in Spotify. So I believe this is the part where I exit and a great outro screen comes out. Bye, Hibiscuses.